invite Tan Sri Syed Hamid Alba, former Malaysian Foreign Affairs Minister, to deliver his keynote address under the title Never Again, Genocide in Gaza Repeating History. Please welcome Tan Sri.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulil amin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Yang saya hormati saudara pengajar majlis, yang saya hormati Cikgu Aziz Abdul Hamid, Presiden Majlis Perunding Persatuan Islam Malaysia atau MAPI, Saudara Muhyiddin Badir, Pengarah Citizen International Malaysia, Lilian Fan, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Alhamdulillah, I am grateful to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala for giving us the opportunity to gather today, this morning, on an important subject of Never Again, Genocide in Gaza, Repeating History, as part of the program of MAPI, together with IAIS, to commemorate and at the same time bring awareness to the thing, to the incident that is happening in Gaza. Ladies and gentlemen, I actually find difficulty to speak on this subject because I think this is a subject where there is no humanity, there is no law. If we talk about the law of the jungle, the international system has reduced itself as a place like the law of the jungle. International law does not matter. Human feeling does not matter. Crime does not matter. I think in this situation, it's very interesting. You have assembled three distinguished speakers to speak on a subject of such importance. But you are also speaking on a country that has never been subject to international law since its formation. It has always got the cover that it does not have to follow or be with the international community for everything that they have done. So it's a difficult subject. Whatever you are going to conclude, they will not follow because they don't have to follow. So I think, ladies and gentlemen, thank you first of all for MAPI for inviting me to say a few words, and also IAS for inviting me to make a keynote speech. Today, I like to address you on a matter of great urgency and profound moral significance. We gather to discuss the harrowing situation in Gaza, a crisis that not only challenges our collective conscience, but also tests the very foundation of international law and human rights. As we speak, Gaza is enduring a catastrophe that numerous scholars, experts, and international observers have identified as genocide. I think if we look at the 10 stages of genocide, it just simply fits it very well on every part and every stage of that stage of genocide. This term is heavy with historical and moral weight, and is not used lightly. It is a crisis that compels us to take a stand, to act in accordance with our deepest values of justice and humanity. The evidence before us is not merely numbers and statistics, but stories of human suffering, loss, and trauma. More than, as at present, 30,000 Palestinians, and nearly, as you all know, half of them children and youth, have been killed. Thousands more are missing. Nearly 2 million people have been displaced, constituting about 85% of Gaza's population. More than 60% of Gaza's housing stock is no longer on the face of this earth. These are not just figures. They represent individual life, bodies and soul, families shattered, dreams extinguished. Therefore, the South African legal team's recent application to the International Court of Justice is indeed a pivotal development in this context. Their request for provisional measures against Israel is based on a compelling argument. The acts committed in Gaza fulfill both the intent and execution elements of genocide, or at least offer a plausible ground to believe it is conceivable. This assertion is not made in a vacuum. It is supported by a comprehensive body of evidence, including a meticulous database compiled by Law for Palestine. This database contains over 500 statements from Israeli leaders reflecting a clear intent to destroy Palestinians as a national and ethnic group. I'm wondering how the press spokesman or spokesperson of the US can say it is a groundless act, meritless, without, it's counterproductive. So I think it's difficult for us to swallow the words of those people who advocate civilization, freedom, democracy, and rights, when they are the one that preach profanity outright in broad daylight. We must consider the legal framework governing our response. How do we respond to all this? The crime of genocide, as defined by the United Nations Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of Crime of Genocide, includes actions such as killing members of a group, causing serious bodily or mental harm, and deliberately inflicting conditions calculated to bring about physical destruction. The situation in Gaza tragically meets this criteria. The constant bombardment, the targeting of essential infrastructure, including hospitals and schools, and the imposition of a siege that has led to critical shortages of food, water, and medical supplies, all point to a deliberate effort to inflict conditions of life calculated to destroy the Palestinian people. I mentioned just now at the beginning that there is no respect for law, there is no respect for morality, there is no respect for ethics. Even when the case is being proceeded, Israel does not stop its bombing. So you are dealing with these issues and these subjects to be discussed. Malaysia, so I'm not talking about Malaysia, but I don't represent the views of the Malaysian government. It's my view, my individual view. I cannot represent it because I'm a person outside the center of power. I think Malaysia's role in this global crisis is also pivotal. We have the opportunity, and indeed, to me, the responsibility to take meaningful action. We have always, based on our track record, stood for the victims, in word and in action, as I proudly have done during my time as a Minister of Defense. At that time, it was the Bosnian genocide in 1990s. And as I have done as a Foreign Minister, when we always supported the cause of Palestine. To me, Palestine for us is a matter of national interest, as we always identify with our Palestinian brothers and sisters. From here, I call for the following legal steps to be done in support of Palestinians within the international legal framework. This is an opportunity for you to debate this, what I'm going to suggest. First, establishing an international precedent by the institution of proceeding in our own Malaysian courts against genocide perpetrators. This is the universal jurisdiction, and it is within our law for that universal jurisdiction to be exercised. Secondly, I would like to suggest intervening, not simply supporting, as our brothers and sisters in Indonesia have done. They have taken an action against Israel on the basis of illegal occupation. The second one that I'm suggesting is that we intervene in the ICJ case in support of our South African friends, like Germany has done in the case of Israel. So Germany is a country that has got the least moral authority to intervene in the Israeli case because of their track record. I think what the Palestinians have suffered actually, it has cost us to understand better what is the truth and to put things in its historical context, to understand. They like to say it's October 7th. It is not October 7th. Everything is now coming up, and there is no way that the narrative is going to be determined by the Western or the Israeli side. It's going to be determined by the people of the world, the citizens of the world. So the second part is, I say, intervene in support of our friend. And the third one is pressuring, this is important, pressuring the ICC prosecutor, Mr. Karim Khan, to be a real prosecutor and act on justice, on law and the statute itself. Because they were very fast when deciding on Ukraine. On this one, there have been so many reports from 2009 and also, and recently Bolivia law, but nothing was done. It is, I think, it's time that Mr. Karim Khan start investigation into crimes more seriously. First, he should institute proceeding against Israeli genocide perpetrators. It would be a precedent internationally and even internally. It would need some procedural steps to be taken, but nothing impossible. I consulted with a number of legal experts, and they explained to me that it is possible to take Israeli, and this I'm talking about Malaysian situation, to take Israeli leaders to court in a Malaysian High Court by the Attorney General on behalf of either Gaza victims who can be brought to Malaysia for mediation for Malaysian citizens who were in Gaza during the genocide. Second, Malaysia is a party to the Genocide Convention and UN, and hence the International Court of Justice. This means we can ask to directly intervene in a case by South Africa against Israel in support of South Africa. This would allow Malaysia to offer its insight and evidence to the court. It would also give an image of international support for indicting Israel with genocide. The other court, as I mentioned, the International Criminal Court, has been avoiding taking its responsibilities seriously with regard to Palestine, unlike the wrong we enacted in Ukraine. Malaysia, while not being a party to the Rome Statute, and hence the Assembly of State Parties of the Court, can still point out the double standards and hypocrisy of its prosecutor and the slow pace of investigation. We are being asked to ratify the Rome Statute and join the court by many Western states. Now I ask, what should be if the court is politicized? If it is a court against the West and Western enemies and against African leaders only, which is for the time being is only all those who are convicted, who have been brought for trial are all either African or non-Western leaders. But Western leaders are free because they are whiter than white. The international community's response to this crisis, as we all know, has been mixed. While some nations have taken a stand, others have failed to act decisively. This inaction has only exacerbated the situation, allowing the violence and suffering to continue unabated. Malaysia must not be part of this silence. Our action must extend beyond mere rhetoric. I think rhetoric, we have got very good rhetoric now, everywhere, from everywhere. But now we need action. And I mean, I, as a former foreign minister, I lose confidence in the international system when I see that everybody is in consensus that Israel has committed something wrong and they should stop and cease fire, and there is 153 countries that have voted in the GA, and yet there is that veto in the Security Council. It's about time that we should look at the Security Council, look at the Charter of the United Nations. We must use, therefore, our diplomatic and economic influence to effect tangible change. We must engage with international bodies, support resolutions condemning this act, and use our position in global forums to advocate for the rights of the Palestinian people. Let us remember that this crisis is not just a political issue. It is a deeply human one. Behind the numbers are stories of individuals, children who have lost their parents, parents who have lost their children, families torn apart by violence and fear, dreams and futures shattered. Our response must be guided by empathy and compassion as much as by legal and moral principles. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, the path before us is clear. We must act decisively and with conviction. The people of Gaza, the whole of the Palestinians, and indeed the world are watching. Let us be on the right side of history, standing for justice, humanity, and the dignity of all people. Thank you to MAPI, to the IAIS, and thank you to all of you for giving your ears to listen to my opening address. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Aziz, for a very enlightening speech. And now, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let's continue with our forum, Crime of Genocide in Gaza, Ending Israel's Impunity and US Complicity. For that, I now invite our moderator for today's forum, Dr. Ahmad Badri, First, Tuan Haji Azmi Abdul Hamid or Cikgu Azmi, Presiden Majlis Perundingan Pertubuhan Islam Malaysia MAPIM. Second, Mr. Mohidin Kadir, Director Citizen International Malaysia. Last but not least, Ms. Lilian Fan, International Director, Guipanyo Foundation. Please welcome. Okay, sorry, but first, I would like to invite Cikgu Azmi on the stage to deliver the token of appreciation to Tan Sri Syed Hamid Alba. Please welcome. Okay, thank you very much, Cikgu Azmi and Tan Sri Syed Hamid Alba. Now, once again, I invite the moderator and our fellow panelists for our forum today. Dr. Basri, the floor is now yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sallam. First of all, I would like to thank everybody for joining us in this very momentous event on the Genocide Memorial Day 2024, organized by MAPIL, Citizen International, IIS Malaysia, and other partners. So we will proceed with our forum for today's event, and the topic of this forum, the title "Crime of Genocide in Gaza: Ending Israel's Impunity and the U.S. Complicity." I think this topic or this title is very timely, and it's a pressing issue and demands attention, and as we mentioned by just now, action. Not only deliberation, but also practical and very practical action. And the situation in Gaza now has been described as a campaign led by Israel, resulting in what we call the crimes against humanity, and including incitement to genocide. And as we all know, the International Court of Justice held public hearings on the matter on 11 and 12 January last week, called for the emergency, whereby South Africa has called for an emergency order declaring Israel as violating the terms of the 1945 Genocide Convention. So with us today, together with us in this event, three prominent speakers that will help us to shed some light on the situation in Gaza, of the genocide, and to make sense of the global dynamics out of the situation in Gaza, and perhaps to come up with suggestions of the course of action that Malaysia as a country and also our people could take in moving forward in helping for the cause of the Palestinian people. So without further ado, I would like to invite our first further ado, over to you, Professor Aziz.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah. Salatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wasahbihi ajma'in. Thank you, Dr. Badri, the chairman, my colleagues, panelists, yang hormat Dato' Tan Sri Dr. Syed Ahmed Akbar, tetamu-tetamu semua. Let me just give you a briefing of why we are here, why we are having this conversation. Every third Sunday of January every year, we have this program that we call the GMD, Genocide Memorial Day. The theme is about inhumanity by humans. The history has it that many of these incidences of genocide, incidences of mass massacre, has marked the history of the world, and it should be reminded that we cannot allow it to happen. There must be some ways of preventing genocide, and therefore this very day we have cities like London, and I heard probably a few more others are also having the same occasion, and we are here now in Malaysia. Thank you very much for all your time to attend. And I think this is not just a kind of an academic or an intellectual discussion. This has to do with something that is in real time. Our theme for this year is Gaza, the case of genocide. This is the most focus of the world, and I think this should be the topic that we will converge our thoughts and try to see what we can come out in. What Astro said, we need real action. So genocide in real time, and therefore we need real action. I think genocide is not in the making anymore in Gaza. People, wrote about the genocide in the making. It is not in the making. It is already happened. It is now. It is even more. I mean, this is the mother of all crimes. Genocide has been defined in the Genocide Convention. So genocide is happening right now in the midst of the world, having so many things happening, and now we see this happening in Gaza. Another thing that have been termed by this genocide in Gaza is what we call the second Nakba. It is not just genocide of killings, but it's also genocide of expulsion, of kicking people out of their land. And therefore, the whole issue is multiplied in terms that the suffering is more than just numbers, as Nancy was saying now. At the moment, until last night, I was always, every night before I sleep, I just want to see the figures goes up and up. So last night was 24,927. And every day, every minute, there will be death that is, unimaginable, that the world is allowing this to continue. So you have those figures. You have more than two-thirds of the killings of children, women. They have even assassinated journalists, reporters, media workers, health workers, even the workers of the United Nations. So everything has been said. So all the 10 criteria of genocide has been defined in the Genocide Convention, fits in very well what Israel is doing. The case that we are saying now is that more so when we feel very angered, not just regretting, that the world system has failed. That is a statement that is becoming louder and louder now. The world system has failed. You have two groupings of the world, the OIC of Muslim countries and the United Nations of 193 countries. And with the 103 or 104 days now, the assault, the aggression of Israel has never been able to be halted, and it's been allowed by having more and more debate in the world, and yet the ground situation is worsening. Meaning that whatever we discuss at the United Nations, there is two layers of this United Nations. One is United Nations General Assembly, one is United Nations Security Council. Although there seems to be a divergence of this, because 150 countries is for ceasefire, is for stop the war. And then in the United Nations Security, in fact, it is a majority overwhelming for ceasefire, but vetoed by US. So in actual fact, even the United Nations Security Council is with the United Nations General Assembly, if you see by numbers. But because of the situation is such that whatever we pass, when it comes to decision by the Security Council, then you have this thing of what they call veto powers. And United Nations has always been halted in very critical issues when it comes to Israel. So you have the US always, US and the UK always play their role. Now, with that failure of the world system, talking about OIC, something very frustrating. They do make noise, they make condemnation, but in actual fact, it can be totally ignored. But the fact that nothing is able to be done to halt this atrocity, this barbarism, this brutality, talks very loud about the total failure of the human being in the world today. That we are not being able among governments to take that serious decision and really making the impact. And therefore now you see that people are not giving any confidence to the governments in any world because of certain historical relations, because of certain treaties that they have, because of certain closeness that they have. So governments doesn't seem to have that kind of strength to make the decision that people want. And now people, I have seen the video from every corner of the world. Either they are Muslims or non-Muslims, either they are the West or the East, either they are developed countries or poor countries. People just go to the street and trying to make a noise, a voice, the loudest that they can, and saying that they want this to stop. But the idea of going through this process of trying to halt these atrocities is that we have what we call, as Tansi was saying, the international law. And the international law is applicable to everything and everyone except Israel. That's the whole point now. There is a kind of exclusion that Israel will not be subjected to anything of international law, anything of humanity, anything of moral standard, nothing. They are excluded. And that's why they call themselves they call it the Israeli, they call it the selected people, chosen people. So they've been chosen to do whatever they want. They've been chosen to occupy, to oppress, to kill, to murder. And now Netanyahu, in one article that I got from Tonaji Mohidin, that they are now reading the prophecies of their biblical texts. They say that they have a religious obligation to kill these people. They call it the Amaleks. That aside from they say that we have a right of self-defense, we have the authority that we have to fight against terrorism and all that. Now they're coming up with this religious text. that they have the religious obligation to wipe the Palestinians from infants to the elders and everything. You can wipe out, and this you have to do it as a religious duty. Now, that extreme kind of opinion is now influencing some of the politicians in the White House. And that is why we see that this impunity that has been endorsed by the people in the White House allows them to say that it's okay, that we support Israel in every sense, in every weapon of mass destruction. They can do it. Because they are very much influenced by this, and they are being not only influenced, but they are being really dominated and controlled. At the pinnacle of power in the US, that anyone who wants to become the president, anyone who wants to govern, must have this strong statement that we are ironclad supporting Israel. It is an unconditional support of the US. I mean, US towards Israel. So this then gives us the narrative that Israel's existence in actual fact and all its genocidal action is done is being able to continue because of this, because of what is supporting them and what is driving them to do this barbaric action. That is why when we say genocide that is done by Israel with impunity, is in actual fact it's about the complicity of the powers behind Israel. Now this goes on and on with so many agencies of the world that has been quite a they declared, they said something about, you know, this is unacceptable. UNRWA, United Nations World Relief Agency, saying that look, our centers are also being bombed, the workers have been curtailed from the work, they've been even killed. Agencies are making those sounds, but it doesn't make any real impact. The situation is getting worse because they say that they have the obligation to protect Israel. The word is that they have the responsibility that Israel, being a country, a sovereign country, has the right to be protected. In that case, now Israel, or we, have to understand that this issue is about not just about Israel. We have to see this in the light of those with Israel, those behind Israel, and all the systems, whether it's politics, whether it's military, whether it's trade, world trade, it's all about protecting Israel by the Western powers. Let me just end. When Tan Sri gave us about 3 or 4 things that he proposed, I like the idea of looking at our international and our law in Malaysia. Now this is quite interesting, because how does the law in Asia be applied to pressure Israel? Probably the last one that we had on the Iraq war is that Tun Mahathir organized this tribunal. And then we found the Western people are guilty of it. But that's about all. But now when Tan Sri was saying this now, that there is things in our national law, as what has been done by Indonesia, terming or defining what Israel has done is illegal occupation. And because Indonesia has put in the constitution about when they created this non-aligned movement, they have this clause that we will not be quiet, or we will oppose any illegal occupation or colonialism. And therefore, if we look at our constitution in Malaysia and the law that we have, there is an avenue, there is a space that we can apply something from Malaysia under legal clauses of the Malaysian law to pressure Israel. The second part And the last one that I would like to propose, probably not in the context of the legal framework, is about how do the Malaysians, be it the organized Malaysian that is called the NGOs, or individuals, or even the governments, can come together and then we act together in a very strong way that our relations with the Palestinian struggle must be strengthened. We are going to have a program we call the Multaqab Masajid in Malaysia on the 25th. We are going to gather all representatives of the 6,500 masjid in Malaysia to come to Kuala Lumpur, and we are going to express what the masjid all over Malaysia can do. They have destroyed 213 masjid now, until now. They are going to intrude and going to do an assault again on Masjid Al-Aqsa. That should strike the nerve of the masjid to come together and do something. In fact, I'm calling the churches also to come together because they are also under attack. So that will happen on the 25th. The next one is on the 10th and 11th. I'm calling an international meeting of a post-war planning of how to help rebuilding Gaza. The details are in our invitation. Those who want to attend to understand the dynamics of humanitarian work in Gaza after post-war, after the war is over. Hopefully, in the near future, we will have that discussion. You are certainly invited to participate. And the biggest one that I have in mind now to keep on the pressure from the nation is to have what we call the 1 million march in Kuala Lumpur on the 24th of February. This is a massive work that we have to do, and we want the voice of Malaysians, being multi-religious, multi-racial, become the voice of the world. And we are doing this just not for the sake of showing that we can rally 1 million people. It's about moving the whole population, moving the whole nation, that unless and until the rights of Palestinians is given back, unless and until they are liberated, we will not be just sitting and observing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Aziz, for laying the foundation for discussion this morning on the impunity of Israel and the complicity of the US in this genocidal situation. So we will move to our next speaker, Ms. Lilian Fan, the National Director of Youtanyo Foundation. Excuse my pronunciation, if not correct. So I think given your long experience in humanitarian activism and also your expert in the post-crisis issues, so maybe you could shed some light on this topic or on this situation. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Moderator. Thank you, Chief Aziz, and to IAIS for inviting me for what is unfortunately a very solid discussion. And it's a pity that we have to convene on such occasions to discuss some of the worst atrocities that we've seen in human history. I think like Tanstri mentioned just now, it actually wasn't easy for me either to think about what to say on such an occasion. I think what has been happening in Gaza, even though we are so far away, whatever little we have been able to see through the means that we have, I think has just broken all of us. And this is just a fragment, and not even a tiny fragment of what the Palestinians themselves in Gaza and even in West Bank now, who are also suffering, are feeling. And we are feeling this through stories we hear from our friends. I have two dear Palestinian friends who are here, Dr. Halim and Dr. Aladdin, both from Gaza. And many of us here have friends from Gaza and from other parts of Palestine, but also those of us who just feel what we feel because we have Gaza is not about religion, it's not about, even I would go so far as to say, although we can't not talk about the politics, it's deeper than this. It's not about a political argument. This is really, it's challenging the core of our humanity. And I think this is the most, unfortunately, the most tragic issue now. So I thought that to bring us back to that humanity, I thought that I would, sort of begin by actually reminding us of the depth of the humanity of Palestinians, and also the fact that this, unfortunately, very long experience of catastrophe, Nakba, and exile, and dispossession has been, it's been a very deep history, but it's also been one that Palestinians have emerged from and have transformed into a form of resistance, which I would really like us to emphasize today, because the strongest resistance that the Palestinians have shown us is non-violent resistance, extremely strong, and it is inspiring the entire world. So I think that we have to look, beyond the rhetoric that many, unfortunately, in the West would have us believe that this is really about, the fight against terrorism. I think we need to remember that the resistance of the Palestinian people is a popular resistance, and for the most part, for decades, has been a non-violent resistance, which has inspired and continues to inspire, even stronger now, many of us around the world who want to hold on to that most sacred thing, which is humanity, whichever religion we follow. So I wanted to start with a quote from a poem by perhaps the greatest Palestinian poet, and definitely one of the greatest poets who ever lived, Mahmoud Darwish. And I will attempt to read it in my very basic Arabic, but it's lines which I think encapsulate what Palestinians have been feeling for so many years. And it's from his poem called Hadiku bin al-Ardu, which is The Earth Presses Against Us. And it was published in a book collection called Warud al-Qal, which was published in 1986, a very long time ago. But he has two lines in the poem which read, Ila aina nazahabu ba'd al-hudud al-akhiran. Aina tatiru al-safiru ba'd al-sama al-akhiran. In English, it translates as, where do we go after the last border? Where do the birds fly after the last sky? These are lines which Mahmoud Darwish, the late Mahmoud Darwish, wrote years ago, many, many years ago. But even at the time when he wrote this, this was 4 decades after the Nakba, the first Nakba. Many years later, we are now in 2024, and we are seeing a continued lack of recognition legally at the international level, in spite of institutions, in spite of the majority of nation states who support Palestinian self-determination and nationhood and personhood. We still fail to see this happen on the global scale. And why is that? It's because, unfortunately, our global order is not one which reflects the majority. It is not one which reflects actually the will of the majority of people in the world right now. So sadly, we are still there. We are at the point where we have to ask these questions, and Palestinians are still asking these questions. Where do we go after we are being pushed and pushed? The earth is pressing against us, the entire world is coming down on us, and we keep being pushed further and further into the abyss of inhumanity. Whether it's through the bombing of hospitals, whether it's through the absolute, the incessant murder of children in the most horrific ways, whether it's the dehumanization of killing entire generations of families and then leaving survivors to their dead family members out through the rubble with their own fingers. It's just one inhumanity after another. And I think it's important to remind ourselves that when we talk about genocide, there is the Genocide Convention. This is one, of course, of the most important documents, but we also need to remember that there's a social side and a cultural, institutionalized side to genocide. And I would like to point out and remind everyone about Professor Gregory Stanton's 10 stages of genocide, which he defined some years ago, which are really helpful in helping us understand genocide beyond, just a small legal definition. I mean, it's one of the most, I think, difficult and obviously legal scholars are extremely careful when they talk about genocide and they try to define it. But we need to look beyond, is it the numbers of people who are being killed? Is it, there are so many stages, and it doesn't start with killings. It starts with, number one, classification. The minute you start to classify and subject people to categories which exclude them so much from accessing any kind of rights. Classification, of course, happens in every society. You have different stratification. But if it gets to the point where you are dehumanizing the other, and that classification, leads to symbolization, which is the second stage of genocide, discrimination, which is a denial of rights to that particular group, or a particular group, dehumanization, and then an organizing and polarization and a mobilization against those people. This is already paving the path to genocide. It's not something that happens overnight, it's something that happens over history. Then you have preparation and the planning of genocide in many ways, and genocide happens in many ways. It's not just, killing, it's many other ways as well. Persecution, of course, and then extermination, and finally denial. And I think in the context of Palestine and Gaza, I mean, it's really difficult to argue that we haven't seen at least the majority of these stages unfold already. So the next point I want to make is the importance of history, and I think particularly history as not written by the victors, history written from below. When we're talking about international law and international legal frameworks, let's not forget the terrible history that we have internationally and globally, that at one time, slavery was legal. Colonialism was legal. Today, these are outlawed. I mean, colonialism, I think, still some try to contest it. But let's put an end to this, because, international legal orders are not always universal. What is universal are human rights, the actual rights of people. But the legal orders, very often, and throughout history we've seen, are unjust. And that's what we have to be fighting. And finally, I would say, while we are focused here today, of course, on genocide, the worst of all crimes, let's also not forget the other crimes that are taking place against the people of Palestine. The crime of occupation, the war crimes, the crimes and violations of international humanitarian law. We have to name all of these forms of violence and all of these crimes specifically. We have to protect people from all these crimes, and we have to hold the perpetrators accountable for all these crimes. So I'd like to close with another quote, which is also from a Palestinian, of course the greatest scholar, the late Said, who I had the privilege of listening to in person when I was a student at Columbia University. And to close, I'd like to remind us of his words, where he once said that humanism is the only resistance that we have against the inhuman practices and injustices that disfigure human history. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Vivian, for sharing with us the social or cultural, or like you say, the anthropological dimension of genocide, and also the 10 stages of the genocide. And we move to our last speaker, Mr. Mohidin Kadir, who is the president of the Consumer Association Penang, CAT, and the director of Citizen International and Action-based NGO based in Georgetown, Penang. I think based on your long experience on human rights issue, I think maybe you could elaborate something on this topic as well. So over to you, Mr. Mohidin.
And as the years went by, the Israeli government became even more extreme. And we have the most extreme government today. But all of them have the same objective. The idea is either to control, they have a small Palestinian population whom they could control and take the whole of Palestine to create a Jewish state. That has been whether they are liberals, they are right wing, they all have had the same objective. So we have to see this, what is happening in Gaza today in that historical context. Otherwise we will just be focusing on non-issues. So the next issue is, what is the impact of the Al-Aqsa storm? This is in my view, it is a historical event. It is going to have many serious impact on the West Asia and in the world. First of all, a group of dedicated fighters were able, I think the number was around 1,200, were able to use motorcycles and gliders to break this impregnable wall that Israel had built to protect itself and attack and take over their military installations in that part of the world. It was unprecedented. Arab armies had gone to war and lost a lot of soldiers, defeated in less than 2 weeks. But here you have a group of dedicated fighters. They were able to break this impregnable wall and attack the military installations inside Israel. This is unprecedented, and it had two effects. One is it gave confidence to the people who have been opposing the apartheid regime in Palestine. And also it instilled fear in the Israelis and their supporters of if only the people in that region can unite and adopt proper strategy and tactics to take back Palestine from the settler colonialists who are living in there. It is settler colonialism. It is a colonialism. Israel is a settler colony. It's not an indigenous state. They created Israel by driving out the Palestinians. The Palestinians are now fighting back and trying to recapture, recover their land. So this event gave great hope to all those forces in the world who are fighting against settler colonialism, not only in West Asia but throughout the world. Secondly, there was a conspiracy going on among the sub-Arab rulers, Israel, and driven by the United States, of course, under the Abraham Accord, trying to marginalize the Palestinian issue, in fact, kill the Palestinian issue, and to establish a security structure of Israel, the United States, and some of the Arab countries who became betoken to the American government, US government, to confront the axis of resistance consisting of Hamas and the other revolutionary forces in the Palestinian movement, Hezbollah and Yemenis, Houthis supported by Iran. So they wanted to create a parallel opposing security structure. So the Al-Aqsa storm frustrated that effort. First of all, it brought the issue of Palestine to the center stage of world politics. Everybody is now talking about Palestine. Everybody wants to know the history of how Islam was created. Everybody wants to know what could be the solution to the problem. So there is a worldwide interest now in the Palestinian issue. Before the Al-Aqsa storm, I think about 2 weeks before that, Netanyahu appeared to the United Nations holding a map and showing how he's going to have a cooperation with all these Arab countries. No mention of the Palestinians at all in the United Nations. 2 weeks later, happened Al-Aqsa storm and killed all their conspiracies and the deceits, trying to push the Palestinian issue out of the international agreement. Now, the Palestinian issue has assumed a central position. Everybody is talking about it, papers are writing about it, the Western media is trying to kill it. So, it's one of the greatest achievements. I think it will be recorded in the history. And it's not going to be the same as before. The liberation of Palestine has started. And it's going to go on until the apartheid central colonial state of Israel doesn't exist, and a democratic Palestine emerges where Jews, Christians, Muslims can live together. This is the beginning. In my view, this is the beginning, and we have to kick off this motion of dismantling the settler colonial apartheid state of Israel. And that is the way we can contribute to the struggle of the Palestinians. The Americans realized that all this while they did nothing. When West Bank was being colonized by settlements, there are 700,000 Jews staying in the West Bank and Jerusalem. And that is against international law. It's an occupied country, occupied portion of Palestine. They have no rights in it, but they have been building settlements. And Netanyahu says there is no Palestinian state. In fact, his latest statement yesterday, we will not agree to a Palestinian state, which the Americans have been pushing. But the Americans are playing a double, are trying to deceive the world. You know, they were committed to, after the Astro peace process, America was committed to a two-state solution. And since the Astro peace process, the West Bank and Jerusalem has been colonized by Jewish settlers. And what did the US do? They give more aid, more money, more arms, more diplomatic support to the United Nations and other bodies. Why did they, if they were interested in creating Israelis were not prepared to give up. So they were building settlements, creating facts on the ground, and saying that there will be no Palestinian state. So now, because of the Al-Aqsa storm, the Americans are now bringing up this two-state solution. They will agree for two-state solution. There are already 700,000, or 50% of the supposed Palestinian state is being colonized already. Where is going to be the Palestinian state? And the Palestinian state they are thinking of is a Bantustan. You know, in South Africa, during the apartheid period, they create Bantustan where they put the blacks. They have no rights on the other things, they control them. So they want a Palestinian state which can be under the control of Israel, where just like Bantustan in the West Bank. That's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. I don't think Palestinian people will ever agree to that. So, we have to understand that the struggle is ultimately a struggle against settler colonialism and apartheid. United Nations rapporteurs has come out and stated in their official reports that what is happening in the West Bank and Jerusalem was supposed to be the state of Israel is apartheid. And they also say there's apartheid in the so-called Israel itself because the Palestinians don't enjoy the same rights as the Jews in Israel. So, the struggle will have to be an anti-apartheid struggle, anti-settler colonial struggle, just as it happened in Algeria. Remember, the French created settler colonialism in Algeria. Finally, the people fought, I think more than 2 or 3 million Algerians died in this struggle. But finally, they liberated and they have an independent Algeria. Similarly, South Africa, the whites, South Africans were controlling, they created an apartheid state. Whoever thought in the 1970s and 80s, South Africa will change. But today, South Africa is at the forefront of a democratic state where the blacks and the whites all enjoy the same rights. So we have to be hopeful. We have to contribute to this struggle to liberate Palestine from settler colonialism and apartheid. That should be the role of organizations in Malaysia to link up with other organizations throughout the world and push this forward. It's not going to happen tomorrow, it's not going to happen next month. It has to be a sustained struggle that will take years. But inshallah, ultimately, truth, justice, freedom will triumph. The other important thing is of the Al-Aqsa storm is see, it exposed the whole barbaric nature of Zionism. You know, people have been saying there is no place for ethno-religious politics in the world. But we were trying to create an ethno-religious state, so-called Jewish state. And they had to resort to the most brutal and violent methods to because they were supported by the Western governments and the Western media, this issue did not come to the forefront. They deceived the people by saying that they were victims of persecution, of anti-Semitism, etc. So they became victims. Their sympathies were directed towards the Zionists. And many people in the West, and even in the East, supported the creation of Israel, especially after the Holocaust, where millions of Jews were killed by Hitler. But because of that, they did not realize that Zionists were doing the same thing that Hitler did to them. They took a land where people were living, people had civilization, had an economy, had culture, and drove them by force out of their country and killed them and raped their women in 1948. But all that was covered up because of what happened to the Jews in Germany in the Second World War. So they have been weaponizing this anti-Semitism, Holocaust for their interests. But this Al-Aqsa storm exposed their hypocrisy, exposed the hypocrisy of the Western governments who talk about democracy, human rights, freedom, multicultural society, etc. This is for the others, they don't practice it. So that was a great lesson. Al-Aqsa storm, we must thank people who learned who took this brave move to break the myth. First of all, the invincibility of Israel. Secondly, the hypocrisy of the West, which as soon as Israel faced the threat, they rushed arms and money to Israel to fight who? Not to fight the army, to kill women, children. As somebody said, I think 75% of the people are women and children who were killed. They were not killing fighters, they were not killing soldiers, they were killing simple people, just like you and me. Innocent people became victims. They should, they are okay. So we have to realize the significance of Al-Aqsa storm. I think, as I said, it exposed the vulnerability of Israel. Number two, it created an axis of resistance, which is developing, still the beginning, is developing and growing. And three, it exposed the hypocrisy of the Western powers who are talking about, who are preaching democracy and human rights to the other people, but it's a long subject of the hypocrisy of the West. If I have to talk, it will take an hour. But just to conclude, I just to have a short comment on the Genocide Convention. See, the Genocide Convention, as I said, South Africa, we should be thankful to South Africa for bringing a case in the Court of Justice. See, Genocide Convention has two elements. First of all, it must show the intention of Israel to destroy a group of people. In this case, the Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank. And secondly, we must show acts that manifest this intention. See, in the case of Gaza, it's obvious. If you want to look at the intention, Israeli leaders have come out saying that we are going to clear, we are going to kill, we are going to clear the Palestinians of Gaza. We are going to drive them out. That comes from Netanyahu, Prime Minister, the Minister of Defense, and other very senior cabinet members. And not only that, they argue with that they will just make a statement. Actually, what they say impacted soldiers who are fighting in Gaza. We can see a video in which Israeli soldiers in Gaza are celebrating, singing that we're going to get all the Palestinians out of Gaza. So, it's not only a simple statement the ministers made, it has gone down to the people who are actually in Gaza and carrying out ethnic cleansing. So, the intention is obvious. I can quote so many, but I don't want to do that. And secondly, as to the facts, there are 4 elements very important. Killing of members of groups. They killed more than 24,000 people. Injured more than 50,000 people. And 10,000 people were children. And then, through the intensive bombing, second point, they caused serious bodily and mental harm to members of the group. So we know that every day they will be bombed. There's no peace of mind. People were injured. Thirdly, they were deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction. Deny water, food, medical aid for many days, and then only allow a certain amount to go in. This is the way to get rid of the population. Fourthly, intended to prevent births within the group. Thousands of women were pregnant. They had no way of getting treatment to deliver their babies. And many of them also became victims of the bombing. In fact, women died with carrying children in their wombs. So these 4 things, these 4 facts of actual clearly established, no dispute about it. Israelis have been arguing on technical points. They haven't well about these things. They have no answers. They're just focusing on Hamas. In fact, South Africa never mentioned Hamas. Just focusing on Hamas, accusing them of doing rape and all that, which has been disproved by independent evidence. They have no case, but given the fact that International Court of Justice is not just a legal body, it is also subject to political pressures. We hope they will come up with a good decision to stop the killing and to get food, medical aid all into Gaza. But it must also be prepared. There will be a lot of pressure from the European countries, from United States particularly, to influence in the sense not while submitting, but behind the back, not to come out with those things. But I hope, given the overwhelming evidence of intention, of the killings, of the destruction of hospitals, schools, churches, mosques, 30 or 40% of the buildings in Gaza have been wiped out. With all that, we hope and pray that International Court of Justice will have the courage to come out and give the relief that South Africa is asking for. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mohidin, for sharing your valuable thoughts on the issues and the matter. So I think we move to our interactive session where we allow our esteemed participants today to pose questions or your comments on the panelists. And before that, I would like to invite Captain Dr. Ibrahim Muhammad from ICE International School to speak something on the issue of Gaza. Maybe in 5 minutes before we allow for other participants to ask questions.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Distinguished guests, Hadur al-Kiram, I have a point about Gaza, but it is in Arabic. So anybody who speaks Arabic, I hope appreciate it. And the one who don't speak Arabic, please enjoy the reading. The effect of the word is sometimes like a bullet, or even a cannon. This point is about Gaza, about Mujahideen, about the final victory, inshallah. But Prophet Muhammad says that even the stone or the tree will tell the Muslim, this is what you behind you. صولة الحق دائما الانتصار رغم لأواء شدة وانتظار لا يدوم الظلوم مهما تعالى واستبدت حشوده باقتدار يبعث الله حين يقضي عبادا فيدوسون صابدات الديار عاليات الجدران مهما استطالت وحاطت بهم بكل مدار لن يفيد اليهود حصن منيع سوف يندق حصنه باندحار كم صياص لخيبر فاستبيحت كم زعيما ثوى من الأحبار فإذا جاء وعده الحق علما هل سيهديهم ارتفاع جدار كم تمادوا في الأرض بعد علو وعلو ثان من الأقدار كان أولاهما فكان خراب ثم سبي بذلة وانكسار ثم حانت نهاية حيث جاءوا من جميع الأقطار والأمصار ثم جئنا بكم لفيفا فهذا وعدكم بالفناء والاندثار ستصيح الأحجار تهتك سترا وستفشي الأشجار بالأسرار أيها المسلم المجاهد خلفي من توارى من اليهود حذاري خذ بثأري فإن لي 1000 ثأر من طغاة تمتعوا بثماري ذلك الحشد ما ترون سيفنى مده الآن آيل للانحسار سيطال الخراب بيتا فبيتا ويطوف الحمام في كل دار هذه القسوة التي في دماهم بعد شأو مصيرها للديار سوف يشتد لليهود غلو بقلوب كقسوة الأحجار هم اليوم في الشعان استباحوا أرض كنعان أشعلوها بنار لا تخافوا على الشام وقدس ما لها من تفرد من خيار شاءها الله أرض خير رباط بعد ليل سينتهي بالانفجار بعد عام سنختفي يا رفاقي بانتصار الإسلام أي انتصاري والسلام عليكم.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Wonderful point. I think another round of applause to Captain Ibrahim. So I think now we invite participants to pose questions or to share your thoughts about our discussion this morning. So please indicate your name and the organization that you represent before posing your question or your comment. So no question? So can you do the declaration? Any maybe some final words from the speaker before we end? So now I think I give to Jibrani for the declaration presentation.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Before I read the declaration, this is not just something that I tried to come up and draft, and you listen to it, but it's more of touching the. I remember Uncle Aziz was saying, touch the heart, open the mind, and move the lips. So what we have been discussing, and this is not only the only discussion, it's been so many around the world, most of the countries who feel this, most groups, intellectuals, activists, are going around and trying to say something about this and trying to convey the need for us to be very serious in this very crucial moment. This is about historic change that is bloody in every sense of the word. There will be a change, but the price is very high. Within the last 100 days, 2,000 babies were born with a cesarean process without anesthesia. All hospitals have run out of use. No anesthesia. Within the 100 days, 2,000 babies were born in that situation. Ambulances were attacked. This is not just unprecedented. This is horrendous. And we do not know the 153 leaders of the world, plus those agencies that is called United Nations, whether they are really serious about the trust that has been given to them, holding the power in their hands to decide that this cannot be allowed to continue. The understanding is important, of course. And Muhyiddin was elaborating on the understanding of it, from history down to the moment of Tawfan al-Aqsa, and then we move forward on what do we do. Lilian was giving the whole thing about genocide that is really something that we have to oppose, and oppose strongly. And now I stand before you to deliver a text which last night I was just thinking, what does this text do? Definitely I will read it because it's in the program, I need to declare it, but then I will also not sleep well there to be comfortable with the text. So if I read this text, which is not uncommon, with so many texts around, so many statements, so many documents, so many reports, but does it move us to do something? Let me remind you, Silence is complicit. Silence is complicit. Inaction is submissive. Not doing anything, you are with the people who are committing the crime. Being silent, meaning you are supporting the genocide crime. So let us be very truthful to ourselves, that once you go out of this hall, there's something in your mind that you say, I have to do this. I'm not talking about the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ about when you see something that is munkar, you have to speak out. Or you have to do something with your hands. If you cannot yesterday, then you have to say. If you can't even do that, you have to reject in your heart, and that is the most weakest iman. And I want to also say this before I start reading this text. We always say this language of humanity. That this issue has always been repeatedly conveyed. This is not only about the Palestinians. This is not only about the Muslims. This is about the Christians, the Buddhists, the Hindus, the non-religious people, the atheists. Even though they do not believe in God, we are all in one. We are all together in this issue. We are talking about a situation where the whole civilization has been questioned. And we do not have the moral ground to say to our children, look, we are modernized and we are very advanced. You don't have that level of qualification to say to your children that you have to behave, because they are looking at it in, as I said, in real time. They look at their handsets, they look at the news, how things are going on. We can't even have that moral ground to say to you that, you have to build a civilization. Everything seems to crack, everything seems to be broken, everything has been in a situation that denies the real truth of what we call justice. So this Genocide Memorial Day Declaration 2024 is a document that we came out from Malaysia. I do not know the other cities who are going to have the same thing, whether they're going to declare something, whether there is a need to declare. But let me just say this as a conclusion. Genocide Memorial Day Declaration 2024 call for action stop the genocide. MAPIM, CI and Shura, with cooperation of the International Institute of Advanced Islamic Studies, 21st January 2024. We express our profound concern on the grave violations committed by Israel against Palestinians in the aftermath of 7 October, particularly in Gaza, which evidently point to Israel's crimes of genocide committed and still continuing to commit till this day. We condemn, as what UN experts say, the illustrated evidence of increasing genocidal incitement, overt intent to destroy the Palestinian people under occupation. We confirm that there is second Nakba in the making in Gaza and the rest of the occupied Palestinian territory, and the use of powerful weaponry with inherently indiscriminate impacts resulting in colossal death toll, and destruction of life-sustaining infrastructure. We deeply regret the failure of governments to enforce immediate ceasefire, while the international system fails to mobilize nations to prevent genocide. We condemn the support of the US and its allies for Israel's strategy of warfare against the besieged population of Gaza. The bombardment and siege of Gaza have turned it into a killing field and into a graveyard of children. To this day, after 103 days of aggression, More than 24,600 have been killed. In fact, 24,000, now it's only 24,900. Almost 10,000 are children and 7,000 women. Almost 200 medics, 102 UN staff, more than 41 journalists, I think it's already 100 over journalists. Frontline and human rights defenders have also been killed, while more than 1,600 families have been wiped out completely. Amidst Israel's tightening of its 16 years of unlawful blockade of Gaza, Israel has prevented people from escaping and left them without food, water, medicine, fuel for weeks now, despite international appeals to provide access for critical humanitarian aid. According to experts, intentional starvation amounts to a war crime. With half of the civilian infrastructure in Gaza has been destroyed, including more than 200,000 housing units, as well as hospitals, schools, malls, bakeries, water pipes, sewage and electricity networks. The continuation of Palestinian life in Gaza is impossible. There is catastrophe of enormous proportions. Israel remains the occupying power in the occupied Palestinian territory, which also includes the Gaza Strip, and therefore cannot wage a war against the population under its belligerent occupation and under the excuse of self-defense. Israel has violated the framework of international humanitarian law. The civilian status of individuals and infrastructure cannot be directly targeted nor suffer disproportionately. We are equally outraged by the escalation of violence against Palestinians in the occupied West Bank by soldiers and armed settlers. Since 7 October 2023, at least 300 Palestinians have been killed, hundreds taken into custody, thousands injured and individuals displaced in the occupied West Bank. The failure to urgently implement a ceasefire has resulted in a situation spiraling towards a genocide, conducted with the 21st century means and modern weapons of mass destruction and methods of warfare. There has been discernible genocidal and dehumanizing records and criminal intentions coming from senior Israeli government officials, some Israeli professional groups and public figures calling for the total destruction and erasure of Gaza and the need to finish them all and force Palestinians from the West Bank and East Jerusalem into Jordan. We call for the international community, UN member states and the UN system as a whole to prevent atrocity crimes, including genocide, and should immediately take all diplomatic, political and economic measures to end it. We fully support the initiative taken by South Africa to file legal action against Israel's crime of genocide to the ICJ. We demand immediate ceasefire and, number one, allow unimpeded delivery of desperately needed humanitarian aid to the people in Gaza. Ensure that Palestinians arbitrarily detained by Israel are released immediately. Number three, open humanitarian corridors towards the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Israel, especially for those that have been most affected by this war. The sick persons with disabilities, older persons, pregnant women, and children. Number four, end the blockade of Gaza and withdraw all Israeli occupation troops out of Gaza and the West Bank. We urgently urge, one, the deployment of an international protective presence in the occupied Palestinian territory under supervision of the UN. Number two, collaboration of all parties with the Commission of Inquiry on the occupied Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem and Israel, and the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court on the investigation opened in March 2021, as well crimes arising from the recent events, underlining that the crimes committed today are partly due to the lack of deterrence and continued impunity. Number three, address the underlying causes of the conflict by ending the Israeli occupation of the Palestinian territory. And number 4, the international community, including not only states, but also non-state, must do everything it can to immediately end the genocide against the Palestinian people and ultimately end Israeli apartheid and occupation of the Palestinian territory. These are the organizations that I've listed, that we are endorsing this. We will welcome more organizations to be with this, and we're going to send this to the United Nations, to the Prime Minister of Malaysia, cabinet ministers, to multilateral organizations, and hopefully this can be recorded as a submission by Malaysia. Let me just end in conclusion. Since 7 October, it's not the beginning, it began in 1948. But 7 October was something that we were not even able to think. The repercussion of it, the implications, and how it moves the world. And therefore, as rightly said by Aziz, that we really have to understand it properly. Because the Tawfan al-Aqsa is about the truth versus the false. It's about justice versus al-zulm. It's about dignity versus submission. Tawfan al-Aqsa gave a meaning to us about freedom, about resistance. Tawfan al-Aqsa taught us the hypocrisy, the double standard. Tawfan al-Aqsa taught us that nothing is invisible. Even the strongest of powers, nothing is invisible. If that is the conscience of the people, by the Tawfan al-Aqsa, if that is the awareness, then we should come back to our senses that the change can come, the freedom can be achieved, the independence can be built. And therefore, when I was in Tehran last week, talking about Al-Aqsa storm, the awakening of the human consciousness, I delivered this speech. I told them about the meaning of this human consciousness. That the sacrifice has been done by these people. And it also gives us a hope. There is a hope. As we feel so sad and distressed, but still, there is a hope. And the people of Gaza, among the fighters, when I asked them, what can we have? They say, brother, as we give just us, supply us water, and we will survive with 3 days to eat a day. We'll survive on it. We have no problem fighting with only this. Give us water and 3 days a day. We'll fight. And the situation now also taught us that how, so much pain at that level that they can endure, then it teaches us today how the comfort that we have now should not blind us of our responsibility. Every minute we are here, from 9 o'clock just now to until now, the suffering that is increasing. They are trying to live whatever. And yesterday, Al Jazeera come up with a story of a boy and a girl getting married in the camp. It touches my heart. They look so sad, but they just to break this atmosphere of so, the pain and the sadness, everything, they do this wedding. A simple wedding in that tent and saying to the world, look, we are here, we are surviving, we are still standing. And the meeting that I'm going to organize on the 11th about the post-war Gaza rebuilding, I put it Gaza standing with dignity. That Gaza is not begging. Gaza has a pride.
Would like to call upon Datuk Sri Ustaz Ahmad Awang, Chairman of Manar, to deliver some token of appreciation to our panelists and moderator today. Please welcome. All right, first, Cikgu Azmi Abdul Hamid, Presiden Majlis Perundingan Pertubuhan Islam Malaysia, MAPIM. Betul berdiri dulu. Okay, next, our moderator today, Dr. Ahmad Badri Abdullah, Deputy CEO, IAIS Malaysia. Next, Ms. Lilian Fan, International Director, Guitanyo Foundation. And next, Mr. Mohidin Kadir, Director, Citizen International Malaysia. All right, thank you very much, Datuk Seri Ustaz Ahmad Awang and our panelists. You all may now return to your seat. All right, with this, we have now come to the end of our program. Thank you again to all speakers, moderator, and our distinguished guests and participants for our forum today. Jazakumullah khairan jazak. All are invited to enjoy the lunch that is served at the back of this hall. And therefore, we end our program today with Kafaratul Majlis. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.